All right. Are we waiting for a few more folks, or do we want to get started? Okay. We'll give it just a couple more minutes here. All right. So we have a very straightforward agenda for today. I think the previous meetings that Eugene was hosting, those were more organizational meetings. Where today we're going to start, getting into the features. So as we talked about before, we go standards and features on a bi-weekly basis. So this week, I think we should continue our conversation on the features. So I was looking here, at the different features here, and it didn't look like there was a lot of updates to these. So has anybody gotten a chance this week to work in the past couple weeks to work on any of this? You folks can hear me, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me? I'm not hearing anybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
No,
So
no, no sounds coming from Jordan's mic though.
okay, maybe that's what was throwing me off. Okay. Well, since we haven't had a chance to work on these in the past couple weeks, do we want to treat this as a working session and maybe you guys can talk and I could type? How does that sound?
I find that very good actually.
Okay.
And I think that actually the first item, the one related to the URIs,
Yeah.
um, would be cool to start with as soon as Jordan gets back.
Okay. So we have a very high level description here. Um, I think what our plan for each of these is to define a description and then later go into the specification. So if we could get the description for the items that have been defined as critical, I think that would be a good move forward. Jordan must be having some kind of connection issues.
Cool, agreed.
Well, do we want to? So the error tracebacks, I saw we have this link in here. Do we need to pull some details from this into this ticket here?
Yeah, I think so because that document actually describes like what's happening, like what the problem is.
Right.
So it's like a great starting point to describe the issue. And Niraj also included like how are we doing this section. So yeah, it's definitely a document to take into account.
Okay. Well, do we want to start with this one since Jordan seems to be having troubles today?
Hey, I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, hey, Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, sorry about that. I had to migrate myself into the bathroom because my girlfriend has a call at the same time. Yeah, so, I wasn't able to make progress on these specific features this week. But, I definitely had some great design calls with some people here this week on other things. Um, but yeah, nothing related to this feature list.
Okay. So I was thinking, since most of the team, it appears, did not have time to work on this stuff in the past couple weeks, do we want to use this as a working session today, where you guys can kind of talk and I can type and we can work through some of these as a group?
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night, and I think that sounds like a great idea. What do you guys think?
100% agreed.
All right. Well, we have these 5 here identified as critical, so we should focus on these first, right?
Yeah, I am curious to see, Jordan, because I don't remember. Do you already have like a description draft for the static versus dynamic URIs one?
Yep, I believe that there is something. Let me go ahead and find that. So yeah, I'll work on finding documentation for that. And where should I put it? Should I put it in the issue, or
I think we
yeah?
should put it in.
What I did for mine, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that I edited the a comment in the issue and I just added it there like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. I'll be sure to edit there. 1 second. But we could move on to another one while we wait for me to find the stuff for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I drafted some things for the multi-client support. Maybe we could start a conversation around that. It's at the bottom. There is another. Yeah. Um. So so what I've been like drafting there, it's very like raw still. Like it needs still lots of formalizing and conversation, but at least we could start with a description of what we want to achieve with that one, and see if we all agree there, and we can take it from there, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of started a discussion in that draft as saying basically, if we're going to have an ecosystem of multiple clients, which are developed in multiple languages, and they are going to have, and like feature parity is going to be like eventual, but not something that we're going to constantly have. We might want to start to ask ourselves some of those questions, like for example, how are we going to track versioning and feature parity, and what does the process to determine that a client is actually done and part of our ecosystem, and how will we maintain those to much simpler yet important stuff regarding methodology, like are we having like all of those clients in the monorepo? Are we having like different repositories? Are we handling them using the same versioning system that we use for the core toolchain? Um, and so and so. Uh, will they share a roadmap? Uh, and yeah, and things like that. This like the motivation behind this point being critical is because we have added Rust support for wrappers, and we can write wrappers in Rust, but we don't have a Rust client. So we're reaching out to the Rust ecosystem and letting them write wrappers in Rust, but to do simple things, like for example, do end-to-end testing of our wrappers, we need to have the whole JavaScript setup uh, to do that. And yeah, like maybe that could be solved with a better testing infrastructure, but yeah.
Yeah, so Yuri and I actually had a really great talk yesterday about this. He actually sent me like a voice note about this a while ago. I can summarize kind of what the proposed testing architecture would look like for the multi-client ecosystem. It's basically like a generic test harness that we can run for all of the clients. Um, should I kind of go into detail here?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So basically, like what's proposed is that yeah, like in order to uh, I here let me just I'm gonna type this in the issue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Uh, what's the repo? Okay, technical console repo. Let me find the issue. Um, it is multi-client ecosystem. What's the issue number? Sorry.
It's number 2.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry for the hold up.
Yeah, no
Here,
worries.
let me just.
Do you want to
I'll
share
share
your
my
screen?
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, yep, awesome post-testing architecture. So first off, like, the idea is to effectively just have a setup where basically we have a generic way of invoking clients in all languages. We have the ability to introspect traces from these clients. And we have a known good set of responses and traces and traces for each test in the suite. So basically, we have a generic test suite. So this is proposed testing architecture. So this is like our testing, our multi-client test harness. Okay, so now how do we actually do this? Generic invocation. Basically, what was proposed is that we create a client server. So basically, each client would implement a client server, which is a standardized HTTP API for creating and invoking Polywrap client instances. So that's kind of how we solve the generic invocation. Is just through a generic HTTP API. And if I go back in, like, let's say my notes with Yuri, this is kind of what we might expect from such an API. If we look at what this looks like, we support endpoints for, let's say, creating a client, and we can tell it, what plugins to be added. So there would be like a list of like kind of plugins that would be expected to exist. We'd be able to invoke that client. So here, like, we get the client's ID. So we'd be able to invoke that client through HTTP. And then lastly here, like, we add a tracing endpoint. So currently, there's been a lot of thought put into, well, there's been some thought put into how we actually do tracing in the clients. So if you look in the monorepo, there is actually a tracing library that exists for the current client. It's here, tracing. And this implements the open telemetry tracing standard. And so that's open telemetry is a generic tracing standard that can be used in, like, that has implementations in many languages. So, we can use it in JavaScript or Rust or whatever. And those trace events can just get sent to this tracing server. And then lastly, once we do our invocation for like our test, right? So here's our test wrapper. It's like, okay, we're going to test the plugin and we're going to write a file, let's say. So this is like a specific test that's being run. Once we run this specific test, we can actually just get the trace. So we can say, hey, tracing server, get the trace. This might be, let's say, /git or something like that. And when we have the trace, we can basically, check to see if the trace contains the known good call stack trace. So what this does is we're able to check the response of the actual invocation. So, the Polywrap client response to make sure that's correct. And then lastly, we can check the internal like call stack of the client to say, okay, it resolved the URI correctly. It did things in the right order by, let's say, checking the cache first and then checking to see if it was like a registered plugin or something. And then lastly, like it was able to actually invoke the plugin correctly. So this is like the internal call stack, like the internal operations of the client. And then I guess the last piece here is generic tracing. So we have like a generic invocation, and then we have generic tracing. And so the Polywrap client, JS client, currently has support for open telemetry standardized tracing. This is something that is readily available in other languages and will and gives us a standard for trace logging. We would need to define our known traces, letting client implementers know what the order of operations are for their internal, for the client's internal operations. Yeah, any thoughts or feedback?
Yeah, so I wonder, so if we're creating a client server architecture, like an HTTP client server architecture for testing, how exactly are we planning to run/host the servers for this?
To run /host the service for this. Yeah, so it's something that gets spun up within the test suite. So basically, what client implementers will give us. So here, all right. So multi-client test harness. Let's talk about adding a new client to the test suite. Basically, client implementers would publish their client server implementation. So client implementation to Docker Hub, for example.
Yeah. Hey guys, I have posted a message in the voice chat. Check it out.
Awesome. But yeah, Nestor, I was thinking like it would just be as simple as publishing a Docker container that has the client server inside of it, and then you would just add it to a list of known client servers. Yeah.
Right, so it'd be essentially like, for example, like running a local image of Ganache that runs some port, whatever, and then I point my testing code to that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Niraj, does that link talk about things that are very different from this, or are they similar, or can you maybe give us the TLDR?
Yeah, so their problem was very similar to us. Like they have SDKs written in different languages, and they wanted to test it. Yeah, they wanted to test it easily. So they have created this kind of architecture and the test harness for this. And I think we can take inspiration from this and build our own architecture. Yeah, using this document.
Okay, cool. That's definitely a great reference. I'll add it to the description here. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? Yeah, and yeah, sorry to take over, Nestor.
No, it's okay. It's completely fine.
Okay. All right, cool. So yeah, like I feel like this is a good jumping off point maybe. And then yeah, I'll stop sharing now. Yeah.
Okay. Let me get some back up here. Okay, so I think that's a real good starting point for this one here. Which one would we like to move on to next? Do we want to frame out the testing frameworks? What we just did, right? No, we did multi-client support. I'm sorry. So do we want to talk about the testing framework next?
Yeah, what exactly is this? Is this for yeah, Niraj, do you want to talk about what the purpose behind this one is?
Yeah, sure. So this is the testing framework for testing the integration test or end-to-end test for the wrappers. Currently, to test the end-to-end test, we are using Jest for for uh, for assembly script plugin or any sorry, for the assembly script wrapper or any kind of plugin. We are using the Jest test. Uh, but for if we use the Jest test, we need to like do a bunch of stuff like setup and tear down the test suite and also build and deploy the wrappers and have all the environment variable and everything, all the configuration listed, and done in the JavaScript environment. And that may be uh, that may be too much of overhead if we want to just if we just want to test uh, the functionality. And and a better way to do this is to use our recipe. And we can have output schema that we expect written in the recipe. And whenever we run the recipe suite, we also verify and validate the our output against that return output schema. So by using this kind of architecture, users don't need to write complicated just file, and they can just leverage the recipe system to not only check for the output, but also run the test against that.
So what's the team's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that having a standard or having a better specification of what easy end-to-end testing looks like, regardless of what client you're using, sounds really great. Um, yeah, and I guess that is a question. Is the goal for this to be end-to-end testing regardless of what client you're using? Um, or is this just, for your wrapper using, let's say, a JavaScript client, let's say, but just making the testing experience easier?
This would be for any client, and this would be universal for any wrapper written in any client or any plugin and whatever. So this would be useful in any kind of client, given that our CLI have support.
Okay. So it seems like this goes very similarly with the multi-client test harness. Um, because through creating that, we're yeah starting to set standards around how to test, any client. And so, do you think that this should be like kind of using the same sort of like client server approach that was being shown there?
No, no, I don't think we need that because in this case we just want to test the wrapper methods, and if we just want to test the wrapper methods, then we can use any. So yeah, so this testing functionality will be in the CLI, and in whichever language the CLI is written. For example, currently it is written in the JavaScript, so we just need to support the JavaScript, and we will be testing the wrapper into a wrapper test in the JavaScript. But yeah, so it doesn't matter in which language the wrapper is written. But if we want to test the same wrapper in multiple language, then that would be the different test.
Okay. So how would you propose kind of writing out this initial feature description or specification? What would it look like?
Yeah, so for starter, I would suggest to use QLang for writing the writing the recipe suite because it supports output. Yeah, it supports the schema and constraint on the schema so that we can use that particular feature of the language. And since Q is a kind of markup or configuration language, uh, yeah, it won't be associated with any language, and we can run it in, yeah, we can run it easily on our CLI.
Awesome. Yeah, so Joe, it seems like we might be able to make a lot of progress here maybe if we
Yeah,
took like the next 10 minutes and just had people fill out their descriptions maybe
yeah.
and then, talk through them with the group. Like what do you all think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it me or I didn't hear everything that Joe said.
Okay, I think what Jordan was proposing is that we take the next 10 to 15 minutes for folks to work on the descriptions of each of those, and then we can take the remaining 50 minutes to review those descriptions.
All right, cool. I'm gonna start working on the static versus dynamic one. Um, yep, and then does everyone else have something that they're gonna work on as well?
Yeah, I do. I was gonna hop on the error traceback one.
Okay, awesome. And then Niraj is working on the test harness one. Um, and then yeah, if anyone is without one, just feel free to pick one up from the board. Okay, cool.
Is there
And
any
yeah, like. Mhm.
is there anyone in particular that you think I should work on?
Yeah, so it's really just if one of the critical ones is something that you have information on, feel free to add information. And then if there's anything else on the board that you think is important or that you have details on, yeah, just feel free to pick one up, I guess.
Yeah, hey, what are we doing now? Sorry,
Yeah,
I
yeah. Can you hear me, Niraj?
no. Can you type it in the chat?
Yep, I'll type it to you.
Okay.
Okay, how are we all doing? We have like 18 minutes left in this hour. And so what do you guys think about maybe starting with just like a quick little review of what we've put together?
Sounds good. Okay, let's
Yeah,
start.
is
This is looking
yeah.
really good. Want to talk us through your
Um,
comments here?
yeah, sure. And I just wanted to check in with everyone else, like to see if everyone's kind of ready to go through the review process, or if you're all still heads down. Is are you guys still heads down, or are you ready to go through the review process?
Yeah, I'm still working on this.
Okay. Yeah, let's take like 2 more minutes, and then
Yeah.
like even if we're not done, let's just kind of stop where we are so that we can have time to walk people through what we've done so far. And how does that sound?
Okay.
Sounds
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's call it time.
Okay.
And yeah, like the the reason why I wanted to see if everyone else was kind of done was because I feel like in order for this process to be useful, gathering feedback is kind of like one of the biggest pieces here. Um, because we want to avoid, I guess, people doing things and then not being able to leverage the feedback of the group, because that's kind of like the whole purpose of the technical council, I guess. So yeah, like are you guys all ready to start going through it?
Sure.
All right. Would someone want to start? Yeah. Nestor, do you want to start?
Sure. So. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, because Niraj already did like a very, very good job at explaining the core parts of it here in this document. Um, so basically, I think that the premise of this would be that we defined what the ideal error tracebook looks like for wrapper method invocation specifically, and then a condition should be that adding this feature shouldn't change the developer experience, right? So those would be like the two main things. Niraj has already like drafted some ideas here on how that could be approached and how the ideal error traceback could look like. Um, maybe he can walk us like best through this, but I think like the description at least of this issue is it all boils down to this, which
Yeah.
is quite simple.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to say that I feel like we could further elaborate here with the information that we want in the error traceback. So for example, do we want line numbers and function names from within WebAssembly or something like that, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm guessing that that's like part of the challenges that we're gonna like discuss within the scope of this, because for example maybe line numbers are something that's gonna be like incredibly hard, but maybe like just function names and some code pointers, maybe that's easier, and you know.
Yep, and also I think that we have some pretty concrete errors cases. So one error case that I can think of is when there is like a client internal error. Um, so like the actual client. Um, the second thing is when there are internal WebAssembly errors. So those can be of different types. So we can have serialization errors, which that's like an environment that we have a lot of support or a lot of control over, where we can add very specific error messages. But then we also have like user WebAssembly errors, which is kind of like an area that we don't have much control over at all. So yeah, I feel like there's a few different error categories that we should draw out, and that'll tell us like what this error traceback can look like in those different cases based off of the information we have control over.
Yeah, I think we can also include the line numbers and yeah, function name and other things if we can leverage the assembly script. Yeah, if we use a compiler's transform function where we can walk through the AST and do some yeah, do bunch of meta programming with the code written by user to also add these additional functions that we want to add.
Yeah, so there's a few things I want to say there. Like, um, first off, everything is all just code. So we can do kind of anything. And I think that the big question is, should we? Through doing kind of like compiler manipulation over all of the user code, that could potentially be error prone. And so we would want to make sure that that's not something that we're kind of building and kind of putting into our developers build environment. And then secondly is that I don't know if we want to do any custom work for specific WebAssembly languages like AssemblyScript for this. It seems like maybe we should just try to use the default out of the box debug information from the compilers. Since it is pretty standard in other languages to have compiler intrinsics for function name and line number and things like that. So yeah, doing a custom transform for the AssemblyScript compiler does give me a bit of pause.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like I haven't done like a deep targeted uh, analysis of like how far can we get with the error tracing infrastructure that we already have for implementation languages that we support. Maybe that could be like a first action item, you know?
Yeah, and from my own perspective, I think that we can certainly improve the error logging in the client, but that's easy to do. And then additionally, inside of the binding layer, so inside of the serialization layer, we do have really good logging through the context. So we actually have a context that tells you exactly where the serialization or the deserialization broke. So, it'll say, serializing this class name, this property, oh, we found the wrong type. So I feel like we have pretty good error logging there. And so, yeah, like, I guess that's kind of my question is like, what exactly are the design requirements of this feature, and can we satisfy it with our current setup?
Yeah, I think ideally we would want whole error traceback like we have in any other languages from like the function that error has raised or thrown to to the most upper level function.
Okay, so and by the function being thrown, are you talking about a user WebAssembly function, or are you talking about a client function, or?
Mhm. Yeah, so it can be anything. So if it is if it failed in the sub invoke, then it would be it would be from the another wrapper. But if it failed in in the current invoke, then it would be from the current wrapper where assembly script. But yeah, it can be anywhere, and we want to show the correct path of the error.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Yeah, I guess that the part where I'm confused is I would be really curious to see what an error looks like today, and then what you propose that the error would look like in the future. Because I feel like we have. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I feel like that information does exist to some extent, but not everything. So yeah, and the reason why I ask is I think that the current black box that we have is the user's WebAssembly code because it just spits out an abort message, and it doesn't give you good information there. Um, yeah. So anyway, I'd like to see like a more detailed like um, review of what exists today and what would exist tomorrow, I guess. Because yeah, it's just not clear to me where exactly we would be making these improvements. Yeah.
Cool. I could certainly like further examine this with Niraj to see like where exactly are the points that are in need of improvement, or where are the points where we are indeed fine, and see if we could require like less work than we actually think we need. Does that sound good?
Yeah. That certainly sounds awesome to me. And yeah, I think there's tons of improvements we can make here. Um, and I guess that just like a broader question is, since we've now kind of talked about this here, and it, like, people know about this and we've been able to provide some feedback, like, is it useful to still cover this in the technical council setting? Or do you guys just want to kind of take this and start creating some issues for it? And this can be worked on. Like, does this need kind of group debate still?
Yeah, so I don't think so. Like maybe we could need some like pinpointed feedback about like very specific things that we can um talk about them if they come up. But like as you know, specific points, we don't need to like uh orient discussion of the council around this further, I think. At least not for now.
Okay, cool. So maybe we can move this task status to, like it's been discussed and like issues are being created or something like that. It's uh it's kind of moved down the pipeline. What do you
Yeah,
think about
agreed.
that?
Agreed.
Okay. So what statuses do we have available to us? All right, yeah, I'll add a status for this maybe. Okay.
Yeah, currently
All
we
right,
only
cool.
have to do in progress and
Yeah,
done.
we have a few more minutes left. I'm down to stay a little after if you guys are available. But would anyone else want to talk about the issue that they were working on?
I can talk about mine, but I was working on one that was not like a critical priority one. So if somebody else had something of higher priority, they can talk about it. Otherwise, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I have a critical one that I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, here let me share my screen. And just really quick, I was wondering if everyone is available to kind of, I guess, stay like a few minutes after. But if not, totally okay. We can kind of touch on this next week, I suppose. Um,
I'm down.
okay. All right. Well, yeah, we'll try and. So the purpose here is static versus dynamic URIs, and I'd love feedback on everyone's thoughts here, because again, like if we have consensus on this being a thing, then we can kind of move ahead with the implementation and or rather with the further fleshed out design, I guess. And I guess quickly. For the status fields of these, I'm curious what you all think about having it as like, need spec, need spec, and then it can be, need spec, and then, I don't know. Yeah, so basically needs description. Needs details, I suppose. I don't know. It's been discussed, and then like needs issues or something like that, like issue triaging. I'm not sure, but we can come up with like some like basic like vertical status for each of these different issues. I'm curious if anyone has any good ideas of what this could be. But, okay, so this is static versus dynamic URIs. The purpose of this, or rather the motivation, is that currently we do not have a good way of knowing what URIs are dynamic. Dynamic URIs are ones that could have their underlying resolution altered into the future. For example, domain.eth could resolve to hash 1 today, but tomorrow it could resolve to an IPF hash that is different. So not having the notion of static versus dynamic actually makes building features like dependency locking impossible. So we've been talking about dependency locking for quite some time, and so yeah, so this is the motivation. Any questions about the motivation?
Yeah, so do you have an example of what a like purely static URI would look like?
Yeah, an IPFS hash is a great example.
Ah,
Um,
right, right.
yeah, so I guess that maybe definitions. So definitions. Static URI is one that uh, uh, it will never change and is hash addressable slash verifiable. So and is hash slash content addressed, meaning it can be verified. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. So this is the proposed implementation. We talked about this in a protocol sync. This is GraphQL code. So bear with me here with the lack of syntax highlighting. Basically, the goals here are to support dependency locking, optimize caching, and hash verification. So basically, this modifies the URI resolver standard interface. So if you recall in the toolchain, we have a standard interface that is used by the core, which is URI resolver. And URI resolver has these two functions, try resolve URI and get file. And these are implemented by all the URI resolvers, so IPFS and ENS and file system. So I'm proposing edits to this where we add this function called get URI info. And given a URI, it will return to you this info structure. This will basically say whether the URI is supported. So, for example, if you pass an ENS an ENS domain into the IPFS resolver, it'll say it's unsupported. So it basically sees if it supports the URI, and then it also says whether it's static or not. And lastly, a verifier. So this is a hash verifier. I realize now that these are all required, but they shouldn't be. These two should be optional. And so the verifier would be, for example, let's just say the verifier may point to IPFS hash, verifier, polywrap.eth or something like that, right? So anyway, and what this would look like in practice is that when you are performing dependency locking, you would take your URI and you would pass it into all of the URI resolvers, and you'd basically say, hey, who supports this? And then whoever supports this, you would ask them to either resolve it if it's not static. So ENS would say, hey, I support it, but it's not static. And so you would then say, okay, try resolve this into a URI. You would get back an IPFS hash. You would then take that IPFS hash and repeat the process and basically say, okay, who supports this? IPFS supports it, and it is static. And so then you would know, okay, I have found my static URI for this ENS domain, and I now have a hash verifier. So that's the general idea. And so we're basically leaving it up to the URI resolvers to tell us whether a URI is static or not. And this is kind of like the most future-proof way of implementing this, so that people can publish new resolvers. But it's also not very top-down, which could be a security vulnerability, but just like a general vulnerability. Anyway, I'll stop talking now, but does anyone have any thoughts? Any questions? Any feedback? One other thing that was looked into here was actually having like an on-chain registry of like known static URIs. So we would have like IPFS there as an example, static URI. And we'd be able to store like our verifier on-chain as well. So there'd be like a registry that the Polywrap DAO would maintain of all these static URI types. That was another proposed option. But yeah. Any thoughts or feedback? Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
I mean, I don't have much to say except that it makes sense to me.
Awesome. Yes, that's good to hear.
I mean,
It makes sense.
it sounds perfectly logical to me. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And do you have a preference between an on-chain registry of known static URIs or leaving it up to the resolvers to tell us what's static?
I need to put some more thought into it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe we can just add that as an open question, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me add that.
I
All right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, the implementation makes sense. And I think it would be nice to have it as resolver because that would make it more extensible. And if someone wants to implement their own resolver and their own verifier and everything, then yeah, they would be easily able to do that with the first approach. But if we put it in the registry, then it would be it won't be that easy to do that, right?
Yep. I definitely agree with you. And so let me just add that to like an answer to the question. So we want to make it easy for outside developers to build new resolvers.
I'm curious about going over the threat model and see if that maybe can give us more insight.
Yeah. So, yep. All right. So let's just add that as another open question. Need to go over the threat model. Okay. All right. Sweet. Okay. So I feel like we have kind of had one group discussion about this. It looks good. Um, so we've kind of done the general brainstorming and feedback, but we still need to, I guess, answer some open questions or, um, and I guess that this could just be a part of the design specification. So um, to back up for just a second, I think that a good way to handle these features in the technical console would be to basically start with just a description and a discussion, like a round of feedback. And ideally, after that, we can move directly into a implementation design. So, like actually writing out what this looks like when we implement it. And then, if everyone's good on that, then we can just go ahead and implement it and we're all good. Um, so it's basically like, three phases. It's like um, description and discussion. Well, initial description, round of feedback, and then the last piece is like an implementation design. And then after that, it's ready for dev. Does that all sound good to you guys as like the different phases for these features?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it like the implementation part should actually be ideally fairly uncontroversial, right? Once you've agreed on the design, hopefully implementation is more straightforward.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so yep, I'll update the statuses for that. Cool. Does anyone else want to go? And also we are 10 minutes over, so if anyone has to leave, like please feel free. Yeah. Anyone else have things that they want to go over?
Uh, I just want general feedback on the proposed design of the uh, yeah integration testing framework.
Okay, great. Yeah. Do you wanna talk through it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So description for this is the good specification and testing framework for the end-to-end integration test for any wrapper and plugin. And yeah, in future it should be extensible enough to support multiple clients. So if we want to test the same wrapper on multiple clients, it should be extensible enough for us to do that. And I think this isn't top priority. The top priority is to define this framework and yeah, make it work on the current available implementation such as assembly script and JavaScript client. So that would be our top priority. But in future, we would want to extend it. So the proposed architecture is to create is to utilize the recipes and cookbook model uh, to also run the test with yeah, with the recipes. So currently we just run the recipes as it is and show the output on the console. And yeah, if we add the functionality of the output validation with these recipes, then user can not only use the recipe to check the output on console, but can also verify this output in automation or in CI, or yeah, just verify it without the output on console. So this can work as a testing framework, and yeah, it would even work across yeah across any wrapper or any plugins, since we support writing recipes for any plugin or wrapper. And for that, we can use the QLang, which has support for constraint and schema that we can leverage and write the output schema and constraint. So here is the example of how that would look like. So as you can see here, this is the API URL, and this is query variables that we describe in the recipe. And this is the actual output schema that we need to add. And as you can see, the data, so output has two parts, data and error whenever we invoke. So we should have data part, and it should have simple price field with this schema. So we can specify any kind of schema with all the constraint using QLang, and yeah, we can validate the output against this. What do you guys think about this architecture?
I have one quick question. I remember you were able to do this for the DeFi wrapper and actually test it out, which was super cool. Is this something that requires any modification to the CLI? Yeah, like what would we need to change in our own code to like better support this?
Yeah, so we need to change the query command and the way we run it. And
Okay. And would we be adding any Q specific integrations there? Or is it just as simple as like dumping the JSON out to the console?
yeah, so that's the main issue. To enable support for this, user need to install the queue in his environment, and yeah, once he has installed the queue, we can just run queue commands from the CLI, and yeah, have this support work. So that's kind of the major issue, because user need to install one separate command.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and the reason I ask is because Q is very cool, but I think that there may be other tools that do similar like output validation work. And so I'm wondering if we can do this in a way where we can support Q, but also support other options potentially for doing output sanitization. Maybe it's best to just say that we, support Q as our like primary testing framework. Yeah, I'm curious what you think is best for the developer experience.
Yeah. So, uh, why the reason I like Q is because it is very user friendly and easy to read. So as you can see, like this is very similar to the code you write in the TypeScript without anything else. If we want to implement similar functionality in any other markup language, we need to have our own kind of system, and it would be hard to have this similar kind of experience that we can get with the Qt unless we create our own uh, specification language or something like that for this.
Okay, sounds good. And you haven't found any other projects that do similar things to what Q is doing?
No, I have looked into some other configuration language and other language that like JSON.NET and yeah, Protobuf. But yeah, all of them are like either just support schema validation or yeah, or do verbose to have this kind of functionality.
Okay, cool. So it seems like treating Q as a first class citizen in our tool chain might be the best way.
Mhm. Yeah, and there is also one tool with which creates the QLang, yeah, which compiles the QLang in the Wasm, and you can use that Wasm with the Node.js. But I'm not sure that whether that project is well maintained.
So is this mutually exclusive with the client server testing structure that Jordan was proposing earlier? Because it seems that like this could um, satisfy all integration testing needs now.
Yeah, like this can do the invocation and the sanitization. Uh, like I to phrase it better, this could tell us what needs to be invoked and what needs to be sanitized. But we still need a cross-platform way of invoking a client in different languages.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I guess the only piece of feedback I have, Niraj, is that this is awesome. Like, thank you for digging into Q, and also thank you, Chris, for bringing Q up in the first place. Yeah, I think it's really, really handy and awesome. Yeah, I think this is really great.
Okay. And do you think is it okay for us to expect user to also download QLang on the machine to have this functionality enabled?
Yeah, so this is something I think that we need to put into the design of the implementation. So the implementation details or the implementation design. We should talk about what the developer experience will look like. So, the user will add it to their system and use it with the CLI. That's one option. Another option is we could use the Node.js bindings that you had talked about through WebAssembly to actually add Q, to add the Q runtime into the CLI. So yeah, I think that that's up to you to figure out what you think the best option is and add it to the design. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That's it.
All right, cool. And yeah, like we're a little over, but yeah, if everyone is still kind of jamming on this, Chris, if you wanted to talk about your stuff, or if you wanted to just save it for the next time we all speak.
Yeah, I could talk about it. I didn't. One sec. Where? I didn't do one that's so complicated. I just looked at the supporting the date type, which I think can be important in some use cases because assembly script implements a date object that follows the same API interface as JavaScript, but it doesn't provide like you can't get like the current date time like date.now, and that's kind of a big thing. And then also there's not really a standardized way for accepting and returning date time strings. Um, it could make sense to follow a standard that would accept datetime strings and then parse them and provide wrapper developers with like a date object that they can more easily work with. And so most languages I think follow the ISO standard. And Java's documentation has a really good example of that, where you use like capital Y's or I forget. But yeah, you use like letters. You create a string of like with letters and dashes, etc. That indicates how a datetime should be formatted. And yeah, something like that would be, I think, nice. But again, like as I said before, this is of course not a very critical priority. But yeah, I just picked something on the list to work on.
Yeah, so one quick thought, Chris, is you know, I feel like the canonical standard is to um, just return the number of seconds or the number of milliseconds since like the January 1st, 1970. Is that the ISO standard that you referenced?
I'm not sure if it follows that, but I think so. The ISO standard is I believe Java does follow that, but as far as I know, the ISO standard is about like string formatting, but
Right. Okay.
but yeah, no, I mean yeah,
Yes. So the Unix timestamp is what Jordan's talking about. The number of seconds since January the 1st, 1970, and the ISO format that Chris is talking about is actually the text formatting standard for a date, like Tuesday 12 blah blah blah, and how you write that exactly.
Got it. Okay, got it. So using the Unix timestamp, I feel like that might be the most universal way of basically like saying a time, because it's just like a single number. And so maybe in the specification we could detail out like what a date time plugin would look like. And maybe it has a function to turn a Unix timestamp into a date structure like you've created here, which does follow the ISO standard. So
Yeah, I have a question with this because since assembly script already have a date type, why don't we use that? And yeah, associate it with the JavaScript date type. And yeah, we can use the Unix timestamp to pass it with the message path.
Yeah, so, I think that we should look at the differences between the assembly script type and, the JavaScript type and also, let's say, Rust, or just using an initial sample set to see what differences there are in these date time objects. And if we notice that there is some significant differences, I think that creating a layer like this that tries to kind of act as the glue between them all would be very useful.
Yeah, but instead of plugin, I would recommend to have a custom type like big int or big decimal, because that would be more native to the programming instead of using a plugin to do basic transformations.
I still find it a bit hard to see like where exactly, like in which situation exactly would we need to create like a custom layer slash data type, because I think that all implementation languages take care of or could take care of this in one way or another, and that a Unix timestamp number or an ISO date string, which are like primitive types, could suffice as a transport layer format, let's say, like serialize, deserialize. I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Yeah, like focusing more on the transport format, and also figuring out like when to make things a base type or a custom type. Yeah.
Exactly, because what makes like more sense to me would be like handling everything transport layer related with either primitive strings or like a single primitive string and or a Unix timestamp number, and let the implementation language layer be the one that takes care of the parsing and the manipulation of it.
Yeah, I tend to definitely agree. And so this goes back to Niraj's point, is like we could just use the assembly script's date time object, but inside of message pack, we can just expect that it is a Unix timestamp or something, and then create a new date time object from that, let's say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we do with big int, and like big decimal and stuff. And so yeah, I think as we do this more, it's gonna tell us more and more like what the kind of like user definable base types will look like. Um, and I feel like the general rule of thumb is that we use existing base types to represent new base type, like new custom types. So it's like this will be represented as a big int or something, or a string, because big ints are just strings. So, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. And I guess the last thing to add here is that you know I think that date time is much more than just a data structure. Um, and so I think that, you know, when creating this new like date time type, we could also publish, let's say, like a date time helpers wrapper, which has useful functions for doing conversions and things like that. Um, and so yeah, like yeah, you know, we could imagine doing something similar, let's say, with like big int as well or something like that. So yeah, like I don't think that with this integration, like we would necessarily want to stop, I guess, with just the transport format. But we could look into like the other use cases, like supporting, date time now, or some other common functions that are used with datetime.
Yeah,
So
regarding, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to TLDR it and say we've talked about the data structure. I think next is we talk about like the actual functionality, like the actual functions that are needed for this to be complete.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if we add the now functionality, uh, I think it should be added via plugins because ability to access the system time shouldn't be built into the uh, yeah built into the our tool chain because we may not want to user of this wrapper may not want the wrappers to have access to their system time.
Yep, I definitely agree. In the voice chat, I'm gonna send a message that has a link to a datetime plugin that I actually already created. The Gelato team was interested in this, and so we already have like a plugin that supports like datetime now and stuff that we can reference. Awesome. Yeah, Chris, how do you feel about all this?
This is good. Yeah, this is good. Uh, yeah, I like it.
Sweet. So, yeah, do we all feel like we're kind of ready for like the implementation design phase of all of the features that we talked about today?
I think so. I think like all the high level implementation, the high level like architecture, whatever design is there, and so like actual implementation design. I think we're ready for it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I also agree. Yeah, and
Awesome.
regarding this date time plugin, what do you guys think about like having a system plugin which have ability to access other system feature like current time or like the current system OS whatever. So yeah, we can have like general system plugin to get all the system feature.
Yeah, I think that when thinking about the system plugin layer, we should look at other operating system abstractions, like for example Node.js, or other runtimes that are multi-platform. And so we can support things like FS or also like information about the process that you're currently running in. And the last thing that I want to say here is that I don't think that we should kind of like aggregate things too much. especially when it comes to the system. They should be separate, so that way, if a person that's running wrappers wants to disable one, they can easily do so by just not supporting that plugin. And so yeah, like I don't think that we should put everything under a system plugin, but instead we should have many different system plugins for file system and process and HTTP and stuff like that. Yeah, and one quick thing here, I'm gonna share my screen. Basically, I had created inside of the roadmap staging repo for the CLI's kind of future plans. I had outlined what basically building the CLI as different wrappers would look like. And these are the plugins that I initially came up with for the CLI. So as you can see, like process, HTTP, file system, and child process. And so it's like if you each one has like a schema. And so here, like you can see, like this plugin would allow you to, exec a command on the command line. So yeah, like I think that building the CLI as a wrapper, building the CLI with wrappers will help us better flesh out the system layer, because we'll be doing a lot of system programming with the CLI. Yeah.
So awesome. So it seems like we made great progress today. Do we have any other that we want to review? Oh, I don't know if I'm having trouble hearing you folks now, or if no one's talking.
No, I think just no one's talking. So
Yeah.
maybe we did everything for today.
Yeah, I think that's good for today. So remember, next week is our other week. So we'll pick up the features again in 2 weeks, and next week we'll be talking about the other area. So any questions, concerns, blockers before we call it a day? So next week we'll be talking about the standards, and Eugene will return next week as well.
Super cool. Thank you for leading the meeting, Joe.
Yep, no problem. It was very easy with all the contributions. So great. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.